Your lessons.
Yay. Hey, everybody. Oh my gosh. Welcome to April. Can you believe that this is webinar 15?
No,
And
insane.
here at the Accountability Success Circle, in case you aren't familiar, we're all about, cultivating positivity, helping people get more done while having more fun. And every month in the AFC, we have a theme. So if you're watching this from the AFC, hello, make sure to say hi either in the live chat or in the replay chat. But if you're watching this and you're not a member of the ASC, in our community, we have a monthly theme that focuses us in areas that we can all improve on. And so April and I, when we were, and Rebecca, forgive me, Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca. When we were planning for this month, we were thinking, what would everyone need, considering all that's going on in the world? And in the US, November is Thanksgiving, and last year we focused on gratitude. And this year we thought it would be best to focus on compassion. And when we said that was the theme, I immediately thought of my friend Sara Schairer. So hi, Sara. Say hi.
Hi.
In just a moment, I'm going to give her a formal introduction and then allow her to elaborate on that. But that's Sarah's thing. Like anytime I think of compassion, I can't help but to think of Sara and her nonprofit, which is Compassionate, because it's her ambition to make compassion a verb. And we're going to get into that and talk about compassion, and more importantly, give you some amazing tools and techniques that will help you, especially if you are, thinking like, all right, how can I be compassionate to myself and to others, considering all that's going on? I feel you. I hear you. We see you, even though I don't see you, but I see you. I get it. So let's get started. I'm going to sort of paraphrase Sara's amazing bio, but Sara is the founder and executive director of Compassionate. Compassionate's a nonprofit organization and global social movement, and it's their mission to inspire daily compassionate actions and attitudes. Sara is a facilitator of the Compassion Cultivation Training course that was developed at Stanford University. And Sara, correct me if I'm wrong, you studied with the Dalai Lama's translator. Is that correct? Did I do that right?
His principal English translator, Thupten Jinpa, is the creator of the course that I teach. So yeah.
Yes, which is awesome. And Sara has led trainings all over the world, in Africa, sponsored by the Botswana Ministries of Health and Education. And she also spent a week at a Rwandan refugee camp working on unleashing compassion within its healthcare system. This is kind of a big deal. Sara's kind of a big deal. And Sara gives talks and experiential workshops. And we are so happy to have her here. So hi, Sara.
Hi. Oh, yay. Thank you. I can't believe, thank you to the studio audience that's with us cheering.
Right? Oh, man. So, Sara, before we dive in, can you just give us a little bit more color on who you are and why compassion became your thing?
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Sara Schairer, and I run and started the nonprofit Compassionate. And people might think you're saying the word compassionate as if it's one word, but it's the two words, compassionate, making compassion a verb. So as you might Google it every day, we want you to compassion it every day and make that just as, I missed what you're saying. I can't hear what the studio audience is saying.
Oh, no, forgive me. That was me trying to see what's going on in the chat, and then I got a little bit of an echo. So it's all good.
That's okay. No problem. So right now that we, as an organization, we lead compassion trainings in organizations and for people of all walks of life. So I've had the opportunity to teach at a maximum security prison, and also to corporate executives. So compassion is needed in every aspect of our society, and my team and I believe that compassion is the answer to the world's problems. We really and truly believe that. And how it got started, that's a very long story. I will invite people to get on the Compassionate website to read about the whole story of it. But long story, very shortened, is that I watched an Ellen episode. She was interviewing Wayne Dyer, who was talking about compassion. He's the one that I first heard say, compassion is the answer to the social problems of the world. I had never thought about compassion before, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And that very night, in the summer of 2008, the word compassionate appeared as compassionate in my mind. And I saw it as a bumper sticker. A few years later, I started making stickers and t-shirts that turned into these wristbands that you flip every time you compassion it or do an act of compassion. A YouTuber in England did a little thing on her YouTube channel in the fall of 2012. And literally overnight, compassionate became a global social movement because we had people from around the world ordering our wristbands. So that's how it all started. And then I became a teacher of compassion, and I've been teaching compassion for the past 7 years. So that's what compassionate began as like this is a cool phrase and brand, and then it turned into this nonprofit that does compassion education.
That's awesome.
Yay.
I wanted to ask you, Sarah, is there a specific type of person that may really, really benefit from your work and your teachings? And I'm one of those people that hates to label anything. But is there a certain emotion or certain thing that you're feeling, or something that a person could be experiencing that should be like, if I'm that person, I need to check out this website? I mean, everybody should, of course, but like, is there anybody in particular that you feel could benefit from you most?
Of course, I'm going to say everyone, right? Because I just think
I agree
but I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I think anybody who's feeling like they don't know how to handle the suffering of the world or their own suffering. So if you are unable to sit with your own discomfort and you don't know, gosh, I got to keep moving, I got to go, I have to have a glass of wine every night to numb this. If you don't know how to be with your own discomfort and tend to yourself without something on the outside, you would benefit from the self-compassion trainings that our organization offers. If you are looking around and seeing suffering around you and you're feeling helpless and hopeless and you are overwhelmed, you don't know how to be present with the suffering of the world, or maybe you're a manager for a team and your teammates are struggling and you don't know how to support them, you don't know how to support your partner or show up for your children, this is the type of training that you would be interested, or I would think you would benefit very much from compassion.
I love that. Yeah. And I mean, something that we talk a lot about in the Accountability Success Circle is that, like, we're not here to just kind of tolerate what it is that we're doing. Everybody that's in the community wants to accomplish goals, and they want to do them in a way that lights you up, keeps you happy and cheerful, and is fun. But also knowing that sometimes there's sometimes you go through obstacles to get to that end game. But how do you enjoy the journey rather than just like plod through and just continuously, run yourself down into the ground, because there's so much to do. So it's more of the way of being as you're doing. And I think that compassion is such a huge component of that. And we were talking, I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but there's not just having compassion for others, but compassion for yourself, because a lot of times we are our worst critics, and we want to we are beating ourselves up for the things that we are not doing right, or that we feel aren't doing right. And so I'm gonna that's why I think that this conversation is gonna be super, super awesome and super important for everyone.
Agreed. Yes. And so we should dive into it. Sarah, you had mentioned that you have done this work in maximum security prisons and in corporate America. And so our first question for you is, why? Like, not why did you do it, but why is compassion training, or just the act of being compassionate, an important trait that everyone should cultivate?
Yeah, I think I touched on this a little bit already, and it's to help you improve your overall well-being. You can be present with suffering if you cultivate this compassion. If you work on this compassion muscle and train yourself and you learn how to be with suffering, whether it's your own or others, you're going to better be able to manage life, because unfortunately, that's a big part of life. And I think it's important to talk about what suffering is before we move on too, because people might think suffering is this big, huge thing, like I got my arm cut off or something major. And oftentimes suffering isn't something that you see, right? My teachers taught me that suffering is whenever there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. So if you want something that you can't get, or you get something that you don't want, you're suffering. You guys ever feel that way? Like you wish you had something,
Yep.
or you wish you didn't have something?
Whole thing about like, coaches are supposed to help you from where you are and get you to where you want to be. So like that's basically.
So that's interesting, right? So if you're not content in the moment, you're suffering. Because otherwise you're worried about trying to be somewhere else than you are, or you're upset about something that happened in the past, right? So if you're not just present and feeling good, you're suffering, which means most of us are suffering most of the time. I mean, I think you can have goals and want to achieve them. That doesn't mean you're suffering, right? But if you're just constantly worrying and thinking about it, you're suffering. But that, I think it's important to recognize that what suffering is, so that we realize, okay, that is deserving of compassion. Probably everyone I meet is suffering in some way. They're worried about something. And I can't tell by what they're showing me on their faces. And that's important when you're leading a team or you're with family members and friends, to keep that in mind, that people are suffering and they're a candidate for your compassion.
Wow. And I just want to just sort of pump the brakes right here. It's like,
okay.
Bombshell. Because like the fact that you like put that like sort of wrapper around what suffering is, because you're absolutely right. Like prior to like meeting you and learning about the work that you did, when I heard suffering, I thought of the most extremes of like noticeable suffering. Like, oh yeah, they don't have an arm or a leg, or they're without something that is like very noticeable. But to hear your sort of definition of what suffering is, sort of that gap, and then realizing in my own, self of like having that awareness, like, oh, I'm suffering. And to realize it happens like out of the blue. I'm like, oh, and so why this is so important.
Yeah. And if you aren't tending and aware of your own suffering, if you're not tending to it and you don't have awareness of it, that's when you're going to burn out. Because you just are going to keep going, and that's not sustainable. So you have to be able to say, oh gosh, I have a knot in my stomach, or my chest, or my shoulders feel this way, or man, I really feel anxious right now, so that you can tend to yourself and then move forward. Compassion, is particularly self-compassion, promotes resilience. If you have compassion for yourself, you're going to be able to get through these hard times and keep going. It's not going to derail you. April mentioned, right, we're our worst critics when we know that, right? Especially if anyone is an overachiever or perfectionist of any kind, we think we have to be the best. And if we're not, then that self-talk will just take us down into a pit. With compassion, we say, okay, I messed up. I'm human. Everybody messes up. What can I learn from this? And I'm moving on. And you don't take these dips that you might otherwise have if you don't have self-compassion.
Yeah. And so, April, do you mind, not April, sorry, Sarah, forgive me.
Yes.
Would you mind taking us through, like, you sort of touched on it, but I want to spend a little bit of time of defining, like, what does it mean
Mm-hmm.
to be compassionate, and it's specifically the difference between self-compassion and compassion for others, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so oftentimes people don't even know what compassion means. They think it's the same as kindness or the same as empathy. And I do think it's important to define it so that we're all on the same page with what it is. And at its Latin roots, compassion means to suffer with. So when we're compassionate, we're able to be present with suffering. We're not running away from it. We're not imagining that it's not there, which we're really good at doing in our society. Like, I'm just going to keep moving and pretend I don't see that suffering, or I'm not going to acknowledge that you're suffering right now. I have stuff to do. We also are not getting overwhelmed by suffering. We can be in the midst of suffering. And at Stanford, they define it as a process that happens. And we are born compassionate beings. We all come out with this quality. And unfortunately, socialization kind of, I don't know, shoves it away over time, especially depending on your upbringing or the systems that influence you. But this is something we're all born with. And it starts with first a recognition of suffering, which is why we do a lot of work in mindfulness in the compassion world, because if you're not present, you can't notice that somebody's suffering, right? If you could be right in front of me, if I'm not here with you right now, I'm not going to notice that you're suffering.
Yeah.
If my mind is wandering or if I have my head buried in my phone, I can't tell that you're suffering. So I have to cultivate awareness and presence first. I can't tell if I'm suffering either, right? So we have to work on that. Then when I see that you're suffering, this is when empathy starts. So I may actually feel your pain, because we have mirror neurons in our brains that allow us to feel what another feels. You might hurt something and it actually might hurt me too. And that's empathy. Or maybe I have to say, I can imagine what it might be like to be Gary right now. I'm going to put on my imagination hat. I can imagine what it might be like to be Gary. Now I feel empathy for you. Okay, so empathy is when you're feeling the same thing as another. But that's empathy. That's where it stops with empathy. With compassion, what you notice is that there's this feeling from within that comes out, and it's this desire to do something about it, right? And we, as I said, we're born with that. It's instinctual. We want to do something to help. And then with compassion, there is a willingness to take action, which is why it's cool that compassion's a verb now, right? So we want to do something. And then recently, there's been an addition to this, and that is at the end of compassion, you should feel good. Most of the time, what happens with compassion is you end and you have this warm glow. And if I guided you through a visualization practice and had you imagine being either giving or receiving compassion and noticing what your body feels like, that's what you would feel. You would feel warmth in your heart and your chest, maybe throughout your whole body. So compassion feels very good. That's why it's something you can sustain. We don't ever there's no such thing as compassion fatigue. That phrase is used a lot in healthcare and different places. That's actually empathy fatigue. If you're constantly feeling what another is feeling, that's not sustainable. But with compassion, it actually has this byproduct of feeling good and energizing and warm, and you can keep that up. So that is compassion. I hope that was your question.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And
Okay,
and I love how you put that. One, you helped us understand, empathy, and the place of that, and that the difference between empathy fatigue and compassion. So what I'm hearing is, because compassion is a verb, is an action, is that why you have that warm feeling afterwards, because you're doing something about it?
Yes, that's where that comes from. If you're feeling like I was able to help, I do think it's hard when you are compassionate with someone and you don't have that feeling like I did anything. I don't think you're not gonna get that same sort of glow, the same feedback. You have to feel like whatever you did helped in some way.
Yeah.
So.
This is so interesting because if I can just sidestep for a second. we were going through last month in our annual planning. Those who attended our annual planning retreat, we started with a identifying our values or recommitting to our values. And what was interesting in my process, because I go through the same process of planning every year, right? Not just facilitating, but doing it myself. I have 4 very core values, but I challenged myself to think about what number 5 and number 6 would be. And compassion was one of the words that like really I was drawn to, but I had like 3 words and I was trying to like kick one out. Um, and when I looked at the word compassion, I in the definition, right, when you go to dictionary.com, it talks about suffering. And I was like, so there's this big aha moment of like, I looked at suffering as like somebody in like deep, deep pain. And I've, now completely, reframed based on your definition that, like basically everybody is suffering. And I thought about, is there empathy? Like, so it's just funny that all of these things are coming up. And ultimately I ended up choosing something that was on the, in the same vein, but slightly different and maybe a little bit more broad, which was open-mindedness as my value. But I kind of poo-pooed compassion as a value because of the fact that I was like, the suffering, I don't know if like the deeper definitions tie to it. But now I'm like, I always talk about compassion and how you have to have compassion for others. And as somebody who cares a lot about, taking action on things, like this has been like huge mind-blowing different perspective on what compassion is, because it's like you take all the empathy and the open-mindedness and the awareness and all of these things, and then you put action to it, like that just kind of lumps all of them together. So I might have to change so thank you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I didn't know what compassion was either before I started on this journey. So you're not alone.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have just cleared the air so everybody watching this know what compassion is, and we need to like spread this webinar like all over the internet, because people need to know. People need to compassion it.
It.
They do.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yay. And so I feel like that is a great segue into the next thing that we want to discuss with you, Sarah. Like you were talking about like the types of compassion, like compassion for others and compassion for the self. Can you give us some tips on how we can start to sort of cultivate that? Now that we know what it is and we know what it isn't, and we're anxious to like, all right, now what do we do? Because it's an action. So where do we get started?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do?
What can you do to cultivate compassion for yourself and others? For both of them, it takes practice and it takes intention. So even though this is a quality that we're born with, as I mentioned, that quality has been sort of squeezed in and buried over the years, probably because it's not something that our society talks about or nurtures, unfortunately. So it is something that takes practice. But the good news is we know that we can do visualizations and different things so that the brain will strengthen in this way and will be more compassionate over time. So as far as self-compassion and compassion for others, there are meditations that you can do that have been shown to actually make you more compassionate. So if you're aware of any unconscious biases that you may have, if you've been able to make them conscious, you can actually do meditations that help you change the way you view a certain group of people or certain type of people. It also goes with people who might challenge you. If there are specific individuals, you can do visualizations in the mind, which we'll do later, that can help you begin to see them in a different light. And the more it's just like an athlete who might visualize competing, right? I know a lot of athletes might imagine running or playing tennis or shooting baskets. These visualizations that you can do, actually, your brain doesn't know that you're visualizing it. They think you're actually in the moment, or the brain thinks you're actually in the moment. So it does work to do the visualizations so that when you're in the moment, you've done it so many times, it happens naturally. And then I also think, of course, I have these wristbands, and this makes it impossible well, can I say a bad word on here?
Yes.
You can.
Okay. So it's really hard to be an asshole when you're wearing a compassionate wristband. That's what I say. So you could also say it's really hard to be a jerk.
For like everybody that triggers us. This is my Christmas present.
Yes.
Right?
It would be nice to. I think we should have everyone in Congress wearing these. I think anyone in government or any type of leader should have this, because it's very hard to ignore this, and having something in front of you that can remind you to make compassion a priority can help, right? Because you can wake up and say, I'm going to make compassion matters to me, I'm going to make this a priority. That's one thing. But if you have it in front of you, or you write it down on your to-do list, or there's a way for you to remind yourself, this is a quality I care about, that's another thing that you can do. And as far as self-compassion is concerned, I think the very first really important part is to start to notice the voice that you use with yourself. So bringing awareness to your inner critic and recognizing, oh, there it goes again. All right, I'm going to change that tone of voice, and speak to myself kindly, the way I would speak to a friend. That's something else you can do. But of course, all of this, I think number one, as I talked about the definition of compassion, and I just brought up with self-compassion, you have to cultivate awareness first. So any type of mindfulness practices that you can do to help you be present and to recognize when the mind is just wandering, or when you're just distracting yourself from being present, that's important, because you're not going to be able to be compassionate if you're not in the present moment.
Oh, I love this. And you're so wise that you answer my next question, talking about the link with mindfulness. And so Sara, like, this is a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So since you've been studying this, you've had the brand since '08, and you've been, for the last 7 years, you've been helping others. Do you find yourself not being compassionate, or are you?
Of course. Yeah, I'm not the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama would say, he says he's just a simple monk too. He's so humble. But yeah, no, this is a lifelong journey. I mean, this is not something that happens even in 7 years of practicing this. I will say that these practices have shifted relationships in my life tremendously for the better. And so I can tell you from my own experience that compassion for myself and others has changed my life. And I recognize this is really hard, right? So there are some people out there that I'm like, oh, I know cognitively how this is supposed to work and that I should have compassion for you, but man, inside, I'm having a really hard time getting there. And it takes practice.
Gotcha. And you had, and the work that you've done, you had mentioned that there's like a process, like a 4-step process. Am I saying that right?
I think that that's the definition of compassion so that's
okay.
Step by step.
Okay.
Yeah, it starts with awareness, and then empathy, and then the desire to help. And then the fourth one is the willingness to act. And then the recent 5th one that was added is this warm glow.
Got it. Oh, yeah. And so, bringing it to the now, we want this to be evergreen, but relevant, because I feel like there's a lot of people suffering in the world right now. In the US specifically, we just had, as of the recording, we've had elections. And so I feel like there's, sides, like this side and that side. And my question to you is, how can we start to practice that? I know we have an activity that we're going to do here in a bit, but do you have any other tips on like how we can, start that practice?
Yeah, because at Compassionate, we really care about trying to build bridges instead of walls, right? And our society is so divided right now. I don't know that it's ever felt more divided than it does in this moment. And I know that I have friends who most of the people I'm around are like me, right? And that's the information I consume, and I'm living in my echo chamber, and that's not going to help these bridges. So I have to be intentional and deliberate with my actions and the way I view others in order to start building these bridges. And I think that there are a couple things that you can do to start working on that. And that is, one, remember the humanity of everyone, right? Every single person is a human like you in some way. They're worried about something. They have family members they care about or that care about them. They want to just lead a happy, fulfilling life like you do. So remembering those people are people just like you, and they deserve compassion. They deserve compassion, and we can't be dehumanizing people, calling them names like, I don't know, whatever, an animal name or even a Cheeto or whatever people, throw out there. That's actually not going to help the brain recognize them as humans. So humanizing people, keeping that in mind, I think is really important. I also think it's helpful to remember that we are products of our systems and of our environments. So I know that I have my views because of experiences that I've had throughout my life and the people I've been around. And I know people who view things differently than I do. They came from a different upbringing. They were around maybe different educational institutions, whatever. They're products of other systems that are different than mine. So that helps me have compassion for the human beings and have anger at the systems that are creating racism and divisiveness and all of the kind of crap that we have facing. I can look at the systems more critically and recognize, okay, we're just products of those systems largely. So that's helpful. I also I watched a TED Talk about this, and recognizing that the two different political sides have different value systems that they care about more. And so trying to just empathize or recognize their sort of the other's values and see if we can have an understanding based on those and come together based on their values is helpful as well. And then just being a good listener, right? Having curiosity and listening with an open heart and an open mind, and not with the intent to try to change anyone's mind. So I'm trying to remember, I'm not a politician, and I don't have, I also don't know everything about what's happening either, right? So as I said, I'm consuming certain media. Who anymore, unfortunately, we don't really know what is true and what isn't true. Other people are consuming different media, and I think being humble and saying, I don't know everything, and I just want to listen to you and try to understand where you're coming from. I have people in my life that are on, the other side of the aisle. I'm from a small town in Illinois. I went to school in North Carolina, but even neighbors around here that voted differently than I do, they're my neighbors. These are people I grew up with. These are friends, and I care about them as humans. I don't have to talk politics with everybody, right? When did we start even doing that? I don't remember politics being like the thing that everybody talked about all the time until the past several years. So let's just be humans with each other and be neighbors and be friends, and try to leave the politics behind.
One of the things on this, if I can just add, I have noticed that I have absolutely no desire to go on social media. For the last month, and even now, because every time I catch a glimpse of something, it's heartbreaking. And I know everybody's very entitled to have their views and freedom of speech and all of these things, but one person will share something, and then another person who's on the other side will come at them, unexpectedly, and then it becomes this, back and forth of blame. And, I have to sit here and I don't want to get involved because I want to have compassion, but I also feel like, am I not doing the right thing by just staying quiet? Um, so, one example in that is that, people in my family, voted for a different candidate for president than I did. And I always will come at things with a very open mind. And understand, I think a lot of it is because of value differences, as you mentioned. I'm trying to listen, I'm doing all those things, but then they're still coming at me with like the anger. And I part of me, I was talking to my husband over the weekend, I was like, part of me just like wants to engage in conversation because I feel like, avoiding the conflict is not going to help us bridge the gap. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's this piece of me that's like, I feel like I need to do something, and it might be difficult, but if, we just continue to sit and not be open to hearing each other's views and coming to some sort of agreement that like, I accept that you have a different view from me. And maybe this is just pie in the sky, like something that I want to do that's not achievable, but I would really hope that it is achievable, because I feel like if we just settle on, knowing that people are going to have differing differences and being upset about it, we're going to continue to be in this space indefinitely. So I wanted to get your
Mm-hmm.
opinion on this as somebody who,
Mm-hmm.
like studies compassion and is all about compassion. Like I like care so much about being compassionate to other people's differences and other people's worldviews, but I feel like, unless we like try to actually communicate about it in some sort of way, I don't know if we're going to really move the needle, right?
No,
Um,
you're right. Hmm. Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, and I think it's important for you to not be the recipient of their anger, right? So if you think that you have to bring your own wisdom into the mix and say, in this situation, I'll feel better if we have a conversation and hear each other. But I would suggest trying to maybe have some sort of rules of engagement and say, hey, I want to have a conversation, but please let's agree to listen to each other and be kind and love each other, because we do, right? This isn't about me trying to convince you or you trying to convince me. That's not what this is. Because that's the thing. We don't want to be told we're wrong,
mhm.
right? And it's tough because I hear you, and I think there are some things that I'm like, but you're wrong, and you need to see it this way. But to start from that place isn't going to be helpful at all, right? So first, let's connect, let's listen to each other, and try to understand. And you can say things from your perspective and hope that they will listen. I mean, unfortunately, we are only in control of ourselves,
Yeah, that's the
right? So it's very helpful for me to live in the world in this compassionate way, because I feel better, right? My compassion for people who challenge me, it really doesn't do anything to them,
yeah.
probably. I mean, but it sure helps me, right?
Yeah.
My attitude and the way that I interact with people is my choice. And I can't change other people, probably, or maybe I can influence them. I always think like I'm going to model this and maybe that will inspire people.
Exactly. I mean, and I think that that's super important too, where, you know, in these situations where I just see, somebody make a claim that is very charging and very
Mm-hmm.
hurtful to somebody else on the other side. Like one of the examples that I saw yesterday was like saying like, oh, if you are, this label or this type of person, how could you be okay with XYZ? And I think that the hard part about it is that it's a little bit more complicated than that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have to kind of step back and drop the labels. That was one of the challenges that we did earlier this month in compassion, because I think when we tend to label, we put people in a box and we place a judgment, and then we don't have
Yep.
compassion if it's not in alignment with us. So if we were to just look at people like human beings, or look at
Mm-hmm.
things at face value and try to hold back from the judgment at first and be open-minded to, crafting a more a stronger story, or a more, informed story, could that could that slow some of the ways that people are interacting. But yeah, there's this part of me that's still like, if I could have this like blanket statement that whenever I see like political conflicting conversations happening, that I can just be like, you guys, we're all human. Let's be, but then I,
Yeah.
it's like, just remember that I don't want you to judge me, or I don't want to be a part of this conversation, but just remember these things that Sarah Schairer said on
Yeah.
webinar on November 18th. Like I might do
Yeah.
that. I might try that.
I actually think it's a good idea, because I hate what I see on social media. It's terrible, and people aren't recognizing the human behind the screen, right? I think that it's so easy to spew all this hate because we don't see who's reading it or how that might affect them, right? And it's frustrating to me that people feel okay being so hateful and mean online and not recognizing the damage that they're doing and not having any kind of compassion for the other. I can disagree with you and your views and still see you as a human being who deserves compassion.
Yeah.
Compassion doesn't matter what your actions are. Frankly, if you're human, I'm going to give you my compassion.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And one thing I want to say, like before we go into the next thing, is as far as your activity, you bring up a really good point about modeling behavior, and that made me think of his name is Daryl Davis. Any of you heard of him? He was a gentleman. He has an amazing TED talk about how he started going to KKK rallies. And he was curious about racism. And he's a Black man. He's a musician. And it all started where he invited this Grand Wizard, this KKK Grand Wizard, to have an interview. Because he wanted to write about it and he wanted to understand it. Like he wanted to come from a place of understanding. And of course, like when the guy came in, Terry Brown said, yeah, the KKK guy. All right. So Terry's familiar with that. But he invited him over because he wanted to learn about it, for a book. And then when the guy came in, he was shocked to see a Black guy. But the interesting thing is, Daryl just listened. He just listened, and he, just modeled that, sort of behavior. And then over time, believe it or not, that guy started inviting him to his house, and then invited him to rallies. And and then in his TED talk, he talked about, like, he showed these robes, and he said, this guy, and other people, they denounced themselves from the KKK, but he didn't do anything.
Ooh, I just got chills.
He didn't do anything other than listen and just model that behavior. And he didn't say you're right, I'm wrong. He didn't do any of that stuff. He was just completely open to hearing what the other person had to say. So I just want to just sort of put that out there, because you bring up a good point about modeling the behavior, and you can disagree. And, we're all human. So how can we keep that humanity?
That's beautiful. In fact, in the classes I teach, compassionate listening is one of the skills that we help people develop. And do you know what that looks like? If I'm listening to you, Gary, compassionately, guess what I'm doing?
Smiling?
I'm not saying anything
Got
back.
it.
I'm showing you I'm listening by nodding my head, and I might be smiling, or I'm connecting with you because I'm looking at you. I'm showing you with my body language that I'm present. But I'm not trying to fix whatever you're sharing with me. I'm not trying to say, oh, I get what you're saying. I'm going to relate it back to myself and tell you my story of this. I'm not interrupting you. I'm not trying to change your mind. My whole job, if I'm compassionately listening, is just to hear you. We are not taught to do that in our society. And do you know how beautiful that is as a gift to offer somebody? Or if you receive that gift from someone who is just listening, I mean, those are the best friends, right? The ones that will listen and not say like, oh, well, you should do this and this and this. It's like, I didn't ask you for your advice. actually, I just wanted you to listen. And it's really not hard to do. You just shut your mouth. And look how powerful that can do. It can change somebody who's a KKK grand wizard into, and that's beautiful.
So yeah, so I advise everyone to go check
you.
that out. His TED Talk is amazing. There's I just recently discovered him, so I'm not claiming to like I've known about this a long time. So this is a new thing, especially in light of everything that's going on with the recent elections. Because in another group that I'm in, that was the question of like, so what do we do? And then they said, hey, how about you take a tip from this guy? And again, he came from a place of curiosity. He was curious.
Yep.
How can someone, and he talks about that in his TED Talk, how can someone who doesn't even know me already place judgment on me? So
that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to watch TED Talk.
Yeah. And so that is a great segue to the activity. I want to turn it over to you, Sarah. For those of you watching, whether it's live or the replay, Sarah's going to take us through an activity, sort of a guided meditation style, so get comfortable. And it's going to just help us start this practice of compassion. So, Sarah, floor is yours. April and I, we're going to participate. It's all you.
Cool. So this is a common humanity, or sometimes it's called a metta meditation. And we're going to start, and I'll have you close the eyes and settle down for a moment by just focusing on the breath to help your mind become present and in the moment. And then I'm going to have you bring a few different people to mind. So I'm going to bring it up now so that you can go ahead and think of who you're going to use, so you're not thinking the whole time during the practice. So the first person I want you to bring to mind is just someone who, when you see them or you're with them, they bring a smile to your face. So someone a loved one or someone that you know well and you appreciate. So think of that person. And now the second person, I want you to think about somebody who, we call this the neutral person, and it's someone that you see often, but you don't know them well. So you recognize their face. Maybe it's a neighbor down the street or somebody at the grocery store, somebody that you would recognize their face, but you don't know them. So you have somebody in mind? Okay. And then the third person is somebody who challenges you. And you may not want to choose the person who challenges you the most in this moment, right? For this exercise, we might want to build up to that, but somebody who maybe frustrates you or annoys you, or their values are different than yours. So let me know when you have that person. Okay, so we've got all three of those, and I'm going to be guiding you through a visualization where you're going to be considering different things about these people. All right, so let's get started. I invite you to find a nice grounded, settled position. It might feel good to move the shoulders up to the ears and down the back a few times. And now you can find stillness and feel your feet on the ground. And notice your seat in the chair. And you can close your eyes if that feels good, or you can just cast your gaze down and focusing the eyes. And we'll start with a few deep breaths together. So exhaling everything out first. Inhaling through the nose and filling the lungs to capacity. And then exhaling out of the mouth, slowly letting it all go. Again, deep inhale through the nose. And exhale. And again, inhaling. And exhaling. And now closing the lips and just breathing in and out of the nostrils. Tuning into the breath in and the breath out. Relaxing the forehead, the eyes, the jaw, the whole face. Softening the shoulders and the abdomen and the hands. And just settling in as you breathe in and breathe out. Noticing what the mind is up to, and if it's wandering, gently bringing it back to the breath. And now keeping the eyes closed or the gaze down, I invite you to bring to mind a friend or a loved one, someone who makes you smile, and imagine that they're standing in front of you. And notice how you feel. Perhaps even letting the corners of the lips turn up into a smile if you feel joy. And now consider that just like you, this person has had ups and downs in their life. Just like you, they're worried about something or someone. This person, just like you, wants to lead a happy and fulfilling life. And in your mind, direct this statement to this person who makes you smile. May you be happy. May you feel peaceful. May you know that your life is a gift. And now letting the image of the loved one fade away, I invite you to bring to mind now your neutral person. So this is someone you see often, but you don't know well. And imagine that they're in front of you. And notice how you feel. Notice that what you're feeling is probably much different than when you had your loved one in front of you. You probably don't spend much time thinking about this person. But now imagine being this person. Imagine their hopes and dreams. Recognizing that just like you, this person is concerned about someone or something. And just like you, this person wants to lead a fulfilling and joyful life. And in your mind, direct these statements to this neutral person. May you be happy. May you feel peaceful. May you know that your life is a gift. And now letting go of the image of your neutral person, I invite you to bring to mind someone who challenges you. Perhaps they frustrate you or their views are different than yours. And now imagine that this person is standing in front of you. And notice that you may not want to be around this person. But see if you can put yourself in their shoes. See if you can recognize that just like you, this person has had tough times and might be going through a difficult time right now. Just like you, this person is special in someone's life. This person is a child, a parent, a friend to someone. And just like you, this person wants to be appreciated, to be loved, and to be happy. And in your mind, direct these statements to this person who challenges you. May you be happy. May you feel peaceful. May you know that your life is a gift. And now bring to mind all three people together in front of you. Imagining your loved one, the neutral person, and the person who challenges you. And imagine saying in your mind to all three, may you be happy. May you feel peaceful. May you know that your life is a gift. And now letting the images fade away, I invite you to return to the breath. Noticing the breath in and the breath out. And taking a moment to notice if this practice has affected the body, the mind, the heart. May this practice benefit the well-being of all. When you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Woohoo.
So any observations? Oh, April, you're muted. Any observations about that?
I kept changing who my challenging person was. Okay. That was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to play this.
What did you notice?
Gary, did you have anything?
April, like you, I added more people, but I did notice there was a bit of softness, especially when I said those things, that you repeat, and it was interesting. Yeah, just at first there was a little bit of challenge, resistance at first of like trying to put myself into their shoes, but yeah, like after it was done, I did feel just a little bit more softness.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself, when you were prompting us to kind of think about like the worries and the struggles that they have, like I was like trying to really pinpoint specific things, and it became, as you were transitioning from like somebody that you care about to somebody who challenges you, it made that process a lot easier to be like, and maybe I did it from like a comparison place of like, I have this and maybe you don't, and maybe that's the thing that you struggle with. And so like, and I it made me appreciate like what I viewed that I had that maybe like they were missing. And of course there's like there's the back and forth, but there's like I can have compassion around that thing. Like, I have these things that keep me very whole that, they either just came to me or I worked really hard for, but then, you're in a situation that is different. And so that was just really interesting. But I think also it definitely softened the blow to go from somebody that you cared about to the challenging person, because you were already in that mindset. So I feel like I'm all about, taking like an exercise and applying it to real life. And if I feel that I'm meeting somebody with this, resistance, can I, really quickly in my mind, go to the person that I care about and shift through that so that I can control myself, like, can I control how I interact with that person other than meeting them with more anger or reciprocating whatever feelings that they are sending my way initially, because it's all about the it's all about the awareness and doing that practice. So I really, really loved this visualization and trying to think about like, who can I do this, the next
Right.
time that I'm met with somebody who's challenging me. Because
Well,
that's
and I can tell you from personal experience, I'm sorry to interrupt,
no, no.
that I did this practice with my ex-husband for months when I started doing this training. And I will tell you, there was a clear shift many months in, but after doing this practice enough times, something shifted in my mind and in my heart. And so I can say from personal experience, this works, and it takes time. And I can't say that I'm always, it's always great with him, but I will say most of the time it is. And I think a lot of that has been because of the work I've done on my own heart and my own mind.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Thank
welcome.
you.
And I know that
Such a gift.
we're just about out of time, but before we go, Sara, thank you so much for spending this amazing hour with us. We appreciate you. And for those of you who are in the Accountability Success Circle, Sara, have you joined already and you're a part of the?
No, I need to do that. I know. I thank you very much for that gift. I'm excited to be a part of the community.
Absolutely. And so for those of you in the community, you'll be able to interact with her and engage with her, and have just a little bit more of a direct line to connecting. Just to also have that resource in the community will be great. For those of you who are not in the Accountability Success Circle and really interested, and you are just enthralled by the past hour of wisdom that we got from Sara, come join the Accountability Success Circle. You get 1 month free, and it's so inexpensive to join. It's just a very safe space that has a lot of open-mindedness and compassion. So come hang out with us there. And Sara, is there any, can you let us know? I think your website is like compassionit.com, all just one word,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So you can check her out if you want to buy the wristbands. I already have that up. I'm gonna check that out. It's a good Christmas present stocking stuffer idea.
Yes, it is. And you can follow us on all the Instagrams and such. Well, not on all of them. We're not on everything, but you can follow us on Instagram.
Yeah. What's your handle?
Compassionate.
Just compassionate. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And we have some wristbands that we'll have as gifts and prizes for our monthly people. So if you end up being one of our highly engaged people and get in the drawing, that might be one of the things behind one of the doors. So
check it out. That's exciting.
Amazing. But for those of you who are checking this out live or on the replay, feel free to enter any questions or comments or takeaways in the chat. You can do that as well when it gets posted. The replay gets posted in the ASC. And again, thank you, Sara, so much. This is going to be great. And then we will have our next webinar next month and we'll be announcing our theme very, very shortly. And so one last thing that I wanted to do to just give people a heads up, we will be having an awesome offering during Thanksgiving. It's our Thanksgiving weekend sale of sorts. So, but you have to be in the ASC to find out about it. So come join the ASC just to figure out what that is. And we will see you again next month. So
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye. Yeah.